Michael Jordan is the name that dominates the basketball world, but what happens when a writer? The next move, full of vanity and conceit, is to make fun of his legendary game. We'll give him a lesson that will last a lifetime, from brutal criticism to breathtaking. Michael Jordan's reaction will surprise you, and you won't believe what happens next. Next, keep an eye out because this is about more than simply a game, it's about pride and legacy. And the startling performance that will completely alter the course of events, leaving you completely in awe. After retiring and leading a quiet life away from the limelight, Michael Jordan received an invitation to an exclusive chat with a well-known sports writer who is renowned for his audacious viewpoints. And a keen tongue weren't scared to challenge the conversation's subject. Following his departure from basketball, the reporter had been covering Michael Jordan's alleged downfall. On how Jordan's comeback to the NBA fell short of expectations, how his skills were overestimated, and how younger players had outlived his legacy, Michael, the calm, collected person, had stayed. He had been quiet for years, allowing his achievements to speak for themselves, but today the reporter was anxious to further ridicule Michael's performance and cast doubt on his. Jordan paid attention to his performance in the latter years of his career and even implied that modern sportsmen were more prepared for success. The reporter sensed success in his comments as his demeanor became silent and unreadable. "Come on, Michael," he continued, leaning in. "We all know the game has changed. I mean, who needs the old-fashioned basics because your style is out of date given that players nowadays can shoot from wherever on the court?" The reporter thought Michael would make a defensive comment in response, maybe dismissing it with a quick joke or a smile, but instead of reacting that way, Michael got to his feet, his gaze serene but cold, and stated, "To demonstrate how out of date I am," the reporter, who was not informed of the impending storm, grinned and pointed at Jordan. "Show me the court with his hand, okay, and let's see if you can continue." But the reporter was unaware that Jordan was more than simply a player who, once great, he was still great, and the reporter's haughtiness would fall away in a matter of seconds. The picture abruptly changed to total wonder when Michael Jordan and the reporter ended up on an empty court. There was only the two of them, and the only sound in the gym was the echo of. As they walked on the hardwood floor, Michael, wearing casual clothing, gazed strange in comparison to the players of today who wore jerseys and equipment, yet there was something about his composed manner that conveyed a lot of information. This individual had nothing left to demonstrate. The Porter, who was confident in his previous statements, stood at the three-point line and laughed while he made adjustments. "Okay, Michael, show me what you have. You're not a child. His sneakers are fine. Let's check to see whether your old game still holds up." Jordan didn't. Instead of responding with words, he just nodded and picked up a basketball to dribble. He moved with a quiet intensity across the court, and the reporter observed with a smirk, assuming this would be a brief, amusing show as he was accustomed to watching Jordan's best moments. But the initial seconds were quiet while Michael practiced a few things, but he had no idea what Jordan could still do in real time. Dribbles while he assessed the reporter, but then he suddenly sped off. Michael's legs surged as he approached the basket, surprising the reporter who was obviously anticipating some slow, deliberate moves. Beneath him, as though he hadn't walked a step since his best days, the reporter didn't have time to respond to Jordan's trademark precision, leaped into the air and dunked the ball with a quick, controlled motion, making the rim sound. When the reporter heard rustling in the gym, he stood there frozen in shock, something that shouldn't have happened. As the reporter gaped at the hoop in disbelief, Michael landed with ease and without even winding up. His confidence was. Michael turned to him, saying, "I may not be playing full seasons, but trust me, I'm still the same," as he began to fade. The reporter, who was caught in the moment's unexpectedness, was left unable to speak. Michael Jordan was not only reliving his glory days, but also creating them from scratch just before. After Michael's dunk, the reporter stood there, his body motionless, and the gym was strangely quiet. Michael's quiet assurance was evident, and his eyes were wide with shock. He wasn't just. He was demonstrating a level of basketball that went beyond time, and it wasn't just about his physical prowess. It was about his unwavering determination, his knowledge of the game, and his passion for the sport that had never reduced. The reporter, who was still getting over the excitement of the slam, and cleared his throat and made an effort to hide his discomfort with a fake laugh. "Okay, MJ, that was. I've seen it everything, so let's see." "Impressive," he murmured, attempting to regain his confidence. Michael remained silent throughout the entire game. However, if you can truly keep up, he only felt the change in energy that the reporter had misjudged, so he nodded and threw the basketball to him. And now that he had the upper hand, Michael had never been one to talk a lot on the court, but today was different, and he realized that this was the ideal chance to remind everyone of his identity, including his passion, heart, and killer instinct. Had established his illustrious career, the reporter reluctantly dribbled the ball in an attempt to shake off the. Prior to the shock, he seemed brisk and youthful, but there was something about Jordan didn't rush because he didn't need to tell the reporter that Michael's presence had totally put him off balance. Tried to quickly go to the left in an attempt to break free, but Michael's defense was unbreakable because he was everywhere. The reporter was anticipating every move with sliding shifting, thus the shot was awkwardly pushed and missed. Michael grinned a little, not arrogantly, but with a peaceful comprehension of the game. He could now see Michael was constantly 2 steps ahead of the reporter, who was pushing too hard to be fast. Michael recovered the ball effortlessly with a straightforward crossover, seemingly in slow time. He stepped past the reporter and attempted another shot. It was a simple, skillful swoosh of the ball. Michael loved the sound of it passing through the hoop as it flew through the air and struck nothing but net. Reminder of why he had dedicated so many years of his life to honing his craft, the innumerable hours he made sacrifices because basketball was more than just a game to him. It was a part of who he was, interlaced throughout his entire being, and it couldn't just go away with time or. When the ball returned to Michael, the reporter observed, but this time, his attitude changed. He was no longer grinning as it became clear to him that he had been conceited. He had dismissed Michael, believing that the basketball legend had aged, but now in this peaceful, he could see that Michael wasn't merely playing in this deserted gym. At last, the reporter said, "He was basketball." I didn't realize he dropped off, but his voice became quieter and more courteous. Michael remained there, unable to complete his sentence, staring at him with. You never know what someone is capable of unless they take action. That same serene, steady glance. Michael responded on the court, his words weighing heavily and simply. The reporter's realization that the game wasn't solely about physical prowess, it was about passion, heart, and an unwavering faith in your. Michael Jordan had never relinquished his capacity to overcome any obstacle. Conviction, and the journalist now realized why Michael threw the ball back to. With a slight smile pulling at his lips, he replied, "You still want to play?" The reporter nodded in silence, feeling humbled that he was now more than simply a reporter. The ball rebounded back to the reporter's head, leaving him with a lasting impression of history and what he had just witnessed. For the first time in years, his heart was pounding, and he wasn't considering the next clickbait or headline. Thus, this wasn't about writing a tale or maintaining a reputation, rather, it was about. The reporter was unable to continue because the game had changed something genuine and pure. Deny that he was surrounded by brilliance, but could he rise to the occasion? He wiped the perspiration from his eyebrow and glanced at Michael, who was standing with their arms folded, waiting for the next move. The reporter dribbled the ball slowly, his head hazy with uncertainty, as though he knew exactly what was about to happen. If he continued, he might even be able to get a shot off without suffering more humiliation, but he had to confront this head-on because there was no going back. The reporter attempted to seize possession of the ball once more, seeming to move left before swiftly swerving right. He was quick, but Michael's eyes, like a hawk assessing its prey, Michael never left him. His body language conveyed confidence that he wasn't scared of the. With a quick flick of his hand, it seemed as though he knew the reporter's every action before it even occurred. He had never before questioned how Michael Jordan had developed into the person he was. Was it just talent, or was there? Michael said, "You know, it's not always about being the best." Breaking the silence abruptly, it's about what you do when no one is looking. You are the only player in the game, so all you can concentrate on is your next move as the reporter continues to watch. "What do you mean?" he said, his breath from the intense moments they had just shared frozen him. Sincere in his curiosity, Michael stepped back and surveyed the deserted gym, his eyes averted as if he were reliving. "Every memorable moment in my career, spanning a lifetime, began when I didn't believe I was good. Enough that each time I failed, I gained knowledge. Those setbacks helped to mold me and made me more resolved. You notice that everyone talks about the amazing shots, championships, and victories, but nobody ever discusses the sweat, the moments that define you, whether they are your failures or your lowest points." The reporter glanced at Michael and said, "They push you beyond the limits you thought existed." Who had just provided a new glimpse into his universe, the focus was now on the mindset rather than the game. The writer at the time viewed Michael not only as the mental toughness that distinguished legends from the others, but also as the. He had previously admired a basketball star, but as a person who had endured hardships, fallen, and risen again. "When I saw you on TV, the reporter's voice became quieter, so I wrote papers concerning you, but I haven't understood it till now." Michael nodded slowly, as though he was aware that nobody really understands this moment until they have experienced the hardship that comes with achievement. Concerning what occurs when everything goes well and what you do when everything goes wrong. The reporter remained motionless for a moment. The comment struck a deep chord with him because he had spent so many years chasing fame and making headlines, focusing his professional life on what appeared to be the next big story, but now he felt as if he had been up in the shadow of something much bigger. Michael's remarks were about life, not simply basketball itself, but the reporter inquired, uncertain of what he meant, "And you've already won, haven't you?" Was truly attempting to convey that you've accomplished everything and shown the world who you are. Michael grinned. "I've never been playing for the world I play for," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Myself to demonstrate to myself that I am competent and that I am prepared to repeat everything," because the reporter was starting to realize that it wasn't about the finding fulfillment within. Continuously pushing was more important than getting approval from others or the crowd's applause. To improve yourself so that you can reach higher and farther than you previously believed was possible. It was about maintaining excellence for the fulfillment that comes from knowing that you've. Despite your best efforts, Michael caught the ball again, bounced it a few times, and finally threw it back into the reporter's hands. "But you're still holding back. So try again and release your fear. Stop worrying about failing and concentrate only on making a photo. You, the reporter, are the only one who can stop you." For the first time, he didn't feel the pressure as he clutched the ball and thought about what Michael had said. Burden of judgment or expectation, no one was looking, no audience to appease, no headlines to write, it was just. The reporter inhaled deeply as he passed the ball and the hoop. When he lined up his shot, the ball flew through the air and spun effortlessly in the direction of the hoop, and for a few period remained motionless as the sound of the ball striking the rim reverberated throughout the gym. However, this time, rather than disappointment, there was an adrenaline rush as he realized he could accomplish this even. If he missed the shot, he continued to advance, and the ball eventually fell into the net with a gratifying swish. Michael gave a small clap, grinning with true pride. Something that made the reporter giggle while he caught his breath. He had made the shot, but more significantly, he had discovered something that would permanently alter his life, and when the ball landed in the net, there was an indisputable change in the air. The gym was quiet before the ball bounced, but suddenly it seemed to be bursting with life, and the reporter was standing there. He had just finished a shot, but it seemed like something much more as the wave of emotions swept over him. Something important had just happened. The renowned basketball player Michael Jordan had just unlocked for a moment, a fresh perspective that went beyond the game itself. The report was still being considered at the time, and it wasn't about the shot or even the game. Concerning something bigger that had always been within of him but had been obscured by uncertainty, fear, and expectations, he became aware that, like Michael, he was preventing himself from reaching his full potential. Noted in what Michael had spoken, the only individual preventing you from. He turned to you after hearing those words echo in his head like a canyon echo. Michael, who continued to study him closely, had the same focus that had propelled him through each and every game. It seems that the championship was now aimed at the reporter. It was the same focus that had enabled Michael to overcome all of his challenges and setbacks, using the same focus that had made him a famous reporter legend. Michael I started, but his voice trailed off. How could he explain? How he could explain the moment's significant impact and how something as basic as firing a shot had totally changed his outlook on life. Michael approached, his presence nearly overwhelming, but his "You've been living with the reality, so don't try to explain it." The words were gentle. There is a narrative in your mind that you are unworthy and incapable of achieving success, but that's just. Everyone experiences fear talking. The key is to figure out how to overcome it. The understanding was so potent that the reporter felt a knot form in his throat. So intense that he was unsure of how to react. He had spent years pursuing tales in an effort to get notoriety and establish. He had published hundreds of articles and conducted hundreds of interviews in a career that relied on outside approval. He presented the world's definition of success while standing in front of the camera, but none of that had given him this sense of purpose that he now experienced, as though Michael had unlocked a door within himself that he was unaware existed. The reporter asked, almost whispering, "Isn't it more than just a game?" Michael nodded, his eyes unwavering. The game is merely a metaphor that explores how you approach the game of life. Being present when you don't feel like it and persevering even when you want to give up are important, because when you do, when you reach the other side, you discover that you are stronger than you ever imagined. The reporter experienced a profound sensation of stunning clarity, as though all of his life's challenges, disappointments, and failures had culminated in one moment. He had always believed that success was about what one could accomplish, but everything had been leading him to this understanding. How you might make the world notice you, but now it was about something distant. More personally, it was about overcoming self-doubt, being true to his mission, and coordinating his actions with it. Truthful to himself, but when the reality struck in, a fresh query emerged in. The reporter looked at Michael, wondering if it was too late to make a change. As though looking for affirmation, the renowned player who had invested the reporter's life inspiring millions now appeared to be the calm, steady mentor they needed. It's never too late. You've already taken the first step. The rest is just about showing up every day, Michael remarked, as though reading his thoughts. For the first time in a long time, it's just about believing in yourself and completing the work. The reporter was filled with hope, not desire for rewards from outside sources, but faith in his own capacity to develop, change, and become someone who could not just tell stories but also live them. but the lesson wasn't finished yet. Michael grabbed the ball and threw it back into the reporter's hands, leaving even more to find. He concluded by saying, "You will fail and make mistakes, but that's where the true magic occurs, when you gain knowledge, adjust, and return stronger with." That Michael gave the reporter space to expand the gym once the reporter's place of competition had suddenly changed into a haven of progress. Knew that this was a life lesson as much as a basketball instruction. And he realized then that Michael Jordan was more than just a player. He was a living example of the power of perseverance, the fortitude of the human spirit, and the unwavering quest for excellence. The writer conducted a thorough. With the knowledge Michael had imparted, he was ready to take on the next task and was no longer seeking approval from others rather than focusing on his own tale and potential. And as the ball bouncing again in his hands, the reporter understood that he was free to create and was no longer constrained by the past. In the future, the sound of the basketball dribbling against the wall was muffled in the gym. Michael Jordan watched the reporter from a distance as the hardwood floor filled the room like a heartbeat. There was a sharper edge to the reporter's movements, and there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. He had learned to heart the doubts that had previously obscured his judgment by becoming more concentrated. The reporter paused as his thoughts began to clear and were replaced with a renewed sense of purpose. His hands clenched around the ball as he caught his breath, but his mind was somewhere. He reflected on all that had brought him to this point, the years he had spent questioning himself, the persistent pressure to demonstrate his value to others, and the anxiety that prevented him from fully accepting his potential. But suddenly he felt as though the fire within him had returned. Wasn't about making headlines or winning awards, being the greatest, or winning over others. Rather, it was about putting himself first, meant completing the task, no matter how challenging. Despite his several stumbles as he bounced the ball a couple more times. When the reporter's thoughts drifted, he recalled how eager he was to start his career in journalism. Had been to use storytelling to change the world at some point, but the desire for recognition had taken over, and the compulsion to stay up had been replaced by the genuine delight of the craft. His interest had become a career due to the competition to find the next great story. Michael gave him more than just a basketball instruction that day, and he had to ask for his permission. Demonstrated to him that true success was in the conviction to follow your own path rather than in the approval of others. Was a resilience lesson about not allowing setbacks or failures to define who you are, and this is the first time. When the reporter was finally prepared to apply those teachings, he took a long breath and focused again, realizing that his quest was far from over. Michael's comments from the beginning kept repeating in his head, "You'll make mistakes, you'll fail, but the true magic occurs there. You grow, you adjust, and you succeed." Returning stronger, the reporter sensed the next obstacle approaching, but rather than despite feeling overpowered, he was prepared and resolved to face whatever came next. Equipped with the knowledge of the best player in the history of the game, but just as the reporter was about to make the next move, Michael spoke once more in a steady but meaningful voice. He claimed to have learned the first lesson, and his gaze was fixed on the reporter's. Yet there's one final thing you must realize, is that your life is more important than the game. Will you accept the chance to grow and learn, or will your fear of failing control you? The reporter hesitated as Michael's remarks took hold, and it was for so long, he had to answer a question that applied to every part of his life and went far beyond basketball. Been concentrating on the surface, the articles, the stories, and the acknowledgement. However, he now understood that the actual question was whether he was leading a life that was authentic to him, one that gently nodded, his eyes locking as he considered the things he had learned and the person he wished to become. "I get it, Michaels," he replied in a low voice. "I've been chasing the wrong things. but I'm prepared to concentrate on what really counts now." Michael grinned, his eyes sparkling. Favorable because the path to greatness isn't about winning all the time. Rather, it's about learning from mistakes and emerging stronger is what makes The reporter dribbled the ball again with a purpose he hadn't sensed before, but this time he did it with newfound clarity. He took the shot, and this time he wasn't only playing a game. Instead, he was embodying the lesson Michael had taught him. It wasn't flawless when it started, but he recognized that, like life, it didn't have to be. As he observed the ball, he realized that the game was about patience rather than perfection. The reporter experienced a surge of satisfaction not from the shot, but rather from settling into the hoop itself, but the strain had come from knowing that he had at last discovered the route he had been looking for. Clarity had purposefully taken the place of the doubts, and at that very moment the reporter recognized the significance of being great, not only in the eyes of others, but Michael approached him and put a hand on his own heart. He smiled and added, "Shoulder, you have what it takes, but keep in mind that it's not about the journey, not the destination, and the journey is about." Initially, the reporter spotted something he hadn't previously noticed while scanning the gym. The possibilities. Opportunities to continue learning, developing, and progressing. And he realized that, with Michael's help, he was prepared to take on any obstacles that could arise. Had made his way, but the reporter had one final query that lingered in his. As Michael left the floor, he wondered how far he might go with this new perspective. Allowing the journalist to consider what he had seen, the reporter was aware that the response to that query would only come with time, but for the time being, he was happy since, as the gym became quieter over the years, he was living success rather than merely chasing it. The reporter had been standing in the shadow of greatness, believing he understood the significance of Michael's remarks, and they reverberated in his head. Gain the adventure and the fame, but it was now evident that this was never simply about basketball. Was about life and the lessons learned from each setback and each arduously gained triumph. The reporter stood there, his Michael was followed by thoughts racing through his eyes as he made his way to the door leading out of the. However, Michael glanced back and met the reporter's eyes for a second. There was only a silent understanding between two individuals, one of whom had previously been on. You will experience times of doubt if you were at the top of the world and someone else was only starting to understand what it needed to get there. Michael stated in a steady, years of experienced voice that perseverance is crucial. Never give up because every action you do, no matter how tiny, closer to your goal. And Michael left the gym after saying that. The ball was still in the middle of the court, waiting to be picked up, and the reporter was by himself thinking. Flung once more, the reporter gazed at it for a considerable amount of time before approaching. And he felt the weight of his own future sitting in his hands, similar to the ball, as he picked it up. He took the following step to ensure that this wasn't just a basketball game. It was about living a tale, his story, and not even about writing stories anymore. Tale about conquering uncertainty, taking on obstacles head-on, rising to your feet after life knocked you down, and never giving up on oneself despite all obstacles, as the reporter understood with clarity. That Michael's true legacy was not his basketball championships or notoriety, but rather the spirit of tenacity and the strength of the human will. The reporter inhaled deeply as he realized that he was not the same person who had entered the gym after hearing Michael's statements. Previously, the individual struggled with self-doubt and was uncertain about his role in the world, but now that the teachings and the moment of truth, he appeared stronger and more distinct. The hoop for the final time, taking everything in, knowing that there will be challenges and disappointments on the road ahead, but the reporter wasn't prepared for those challenges, which thrilled him since, for the first time, he wasn't. He was not scared of failing or making errors since he recognized that those were the experiences that molded him. characterized him as he took another shot, this time without aiming for the goal, and dribbled the ball one final time. It was about his conviction that every effort, every obstacle, and every failure was merely a new step. The reporter felt something click inside of him as the ball swooshed into the net during his own voyage. The strength of the moment and the realization that success was built upon were more important than the shot's perfection. The reporter stood there for a while, taking in all the little wins, all the hardships, and all the lessons discovered. Taking in the quiet and the weight of the fresh start. This wasn't simply a lesson for today, but this lesson would linger in his memory for the rest of his life. The true story was merely, in the beginning, Michael Jordan transformed his life by teaching him how to do more than just shoot a basketball. Live, and the reporter realized at that precise moment that he was all set.